Boker Tov, today's daf is daf Kuf Chof Ches. Daf Kuf Chof Ches in Bavas was going for Chanukah basis on some Masar Shibya. Yesterday we started the sugya of Rav Abba's messages. Rav Abba sent a bunch of messages to Rav Yosef Bar Chama, various halachas. The first one that we saw yesterday at the end of yesterday's daf, the beginning of today's daf, was about if a man accuses another person of saying, "What is my you stole my slave," and the guy says, "No, I didn't," and he denies it, and nobody is allowed to make a shvuah over there. Torah, the plaintiff cannot make a shvuah because you don't swear to pay to collect. You swear only to deny payment, Torah, and the defendant doesn't have to make a shvuah over there because einish bon al avodim. You don't swear on karka or avodim, which are compared to that. So there was no shvuah, but the defendant said, if you make a shvuah and swear that he's yours, I'll give him to you. And the chiddush there is that even though he's not swearing just to absolve himself of responsibility, the defendant's not swearing, the plaintiff is swearing, and the defendant's saying, you know what, if you swear, I'll give it to you. That's the bigger chiddush. And the halacha is like the chachamim in the machlokes between Rav Meir and the chachamim. The question was, Rav Meir and chachamim, are only arguing when the defendant is swearing to absolve himself of responsibility, or even when the plaintiff is swearing and the defendant promises to pay him. You swear, I'll tell you what, you don't have to make a shvuah and I don't have to make a shvuah, but if you make a shvuah, I'll give him to you. And even there, we paskin that if the plaintiff makes the shvuah, he has to give it to him. The defendant has to give him the slave. That was the first case that Rav Abba paskin where the Rav Abba sent to Rav Yosef Bar Chama. And we already said, Rashbam says in the last line on Kuf Chaf Zayin on the base, in all these cases, Rav Abba sent these messages. The halacha is like him in all cases. Whenever you say all, you know what's going to happen? There's going to be an exception to the rule, right? Whenever you make a rule, there's going to be an exception. And we're going to see that exception right now. The 2 dots, 7 lines down on Kuf Chaf Ches Amaral. Shalachle Rav Abba Rav Yosef Bar Chama. Another message that he sent. Halacha is government avodim. Let's say a man dies, and he owed money to Shimon owed money to Reuven, and Reuven now wants to collect it from his Yisomim, from the children. Okay, if there's karka that was mortgaged to the loan, fine. Can you collect also from slaves? Slaves are like karka. So Rav Abba said, yeah, you can collect from Avodim too. But Nachman ain't govin. You can't collect from Avodim, even though they're compared to karka in the sense that you don't swear on them. And in many other cases that they're acquired like karka kesef shtar chazaka, and you don't swear, and there's no din of ono on defrauding there. But it's different with the balchov. You know why? Because a balchov, a creditor, what's the reason why it goes karka? Because karka, I know you have. I know the karka's there. I can take it. The money in the bank can disappear. This can disappear. Assets can disappear. They stole them. They took them away. But the karka's always there. Well, in that sense, the avodim are more like metalton than karka, right? Because the Eved could die, he might leave, he might run away. So the creditor is not dependent on the avodim, and therefore, even though Rav Abba said that the creditor could collect from avodim, Rav Nachman says ein govin, and we'll see in this case we pass like Rav Nachman. Allah is like him always. So even though we said at the beginning that the Gemara is going to say later on, in all cases we pass like Rav Abba's memra, and this was that Rav Abba said you can collect from avodim, but Nachman disagrees, says ein govin. We'll see another shita later on that even Rav Abba said that too, that Rav Abba, it's not halachas government avodim, but rather you cannot collect from avodim. Another case, Shalach le Rav Abba le Rav Yosef Bar Chama. Rami, pay attention over here. We're going to come to our case. Shalach le Rav Abba le Rav Yosef Bar Chama. Another halacha that he sent. Halacha, the halacha is that family cannot testify for one another. Father can't testify about a son can't testify about a father. You can't testify about an uncle. That's like, the bottom are like the father. So first cousins can't testify about each other either. Halacha is a shlishi b'sheni kosher. What about your first cousin once removed that you could testify to? Okay, shlishi meaning Reuven and Shimon are the brothers, and they had 2 sons, and one of them had a son. He can't testify about his father's first cousin, meaning his first cousin once removed. Rabbi Yosef says halacha shlishi b'sheni is kosher. He could testify. Not that he cannot testify. Rav Abba said the halacha is, again, a sheni b'sheni, meaning a first cousin you can't testify about. Can't testify, that's considered a close relative. But a first cousin once removed, you may testify about that. Rava says af barisham. Rava says even more. He says that you could even testify about your great uncle. In other words, a grandson of Reuven could testify about Shimon. You can even go that far. Reuven says, Rav Amar Af Barisha, possible that he could. You remember Rumi, I think it was at Yosef's wedding, when you honored me with being one of the Adim, and then people claimed afterwards, right, that Rumi is Pepe's first cousin, my wife's first cousin. So they said that, I'm not allowed to testify. I was one of the Adim, and they said, oh, you're puzzled. Wait a minute. We're testifying about Rumi's son. His son got married, right? Yosef, I think it was Yosef's, it was Eliezer, I think it was Yosef's. And
Yosef,
it was Yosef, right? So Pepe is the first cousin once removed. Now you say Ishto Kagufa, right? A husband and wife. But here we just paskin. You could testify about could be an aid about a first cousin once removed. So it was okay. Somebody brought the question, but then we said, right, that it was okay. Somebody wanted to say they should do the Harayat Mukadeshes over again in front of Shua, but it was okay. I think it was okay at the end, right? A first cousin once removed, you can testify about. I'm not even the first cousin once removed, but it's through marriage, still it's okay. Rav Amar, Aparishon, even a great uncle. Mar Bar Vashi Amar, you can even testify about a grandfather. However, the Gemara says right away, but let's hope it's like Mar Bar Vashi. It's not like him. And Rashbam points out that even a great-grandfather, a great-great-grandfather, great-great, all the way back, you cannot testify, neither the great-great-grandson about the ancestor nor the ancestor about his descendant, because Rashbam says the ben yerach avahu, a son is like a thigh, is like a bone or a thigh, a part, a limb of his father, and therefore they're all connected. They're all connected. It's like his own father. And therefore, the halacha is not like Mar Bar Vashi, but it could be the halacha is like Rava, that you could testify about a great uncle, right? Mar Bar Vashi. And so here we have, this was like the third thing that Rav Abba sent a message about. And we'll see that is the halacha, that you could testify about, even there's a machlokas about it in Sanhedrin. We paskin, you could testify about a first cousin once removed. So let's say a person was a proper aid. He testified at a sale or a gift or something. He knew that, let's say, this piece of land belonged to Reuven, and the aid knew about that. Said then he became blind. He knew about it, and he testified. He saw it originally. Not that he testified. He first saw the thing took place. That is, when you're giving testimony about something, you saw the original action or murder or whatever the event was. You saw the event. Now you're testifying about it. So at the event, he knew about it, and then he became blind. Can he testify about it? Then he became blind. Puzzle. Okay, so Rav Abba says he's disqualified. Shmuel says, no, you're kosher because you knew about it. Why? Even though you say, how are you going to testify about this piece of land if you can't even see it? The answer is he could say, I know it borders on A, B, C, D. So he knows that even though he can't see. But can you testify about a garment? Can't see the garment. Even Shmuel says you can't. Rav Sheshes Samar, afilu glima. Rav Sheshes says no, you can even testify out a garment. You can say, I know this garment belongs to Jim. I know exactly how long it is, how wide it is. You can testify about that too. Aval naschalo, but not silver. Even silver or metal, whatever, you can testify about that too. How could he testify? He knows how much it weighs. So we have the first opinion of Abba saying that you cannot testify. Once you became blinded, you can't testify at all. Shmuel says you could testify about karka. Rav Sheshes says you could testify about a garment. And Rav Papa says you could even testify about an item if you can go by its weight. Now we're going to ask a kasha on all these three other rabbis who say, yes, you could testify about karka or about a garment or about metal or whatever, silver. If you knew some with testimony, let's say a man knew testimony, he saw the event, and about this young fellow that was involved in something, either a financial transaction or a crime of some sort, and then this man that he knew testimony about, Reuven knew testimony about Jim, let's say, and then Jim became his son-in-law. He got married to his daughter. Now he became his son-in-law. You can't testify. That's a relative. Like Ishtar Kaguvi, you can't testify about his daughter, and certainly not her husband. Okay, or Pikech, let's say a man was normal, but his charish and he became deaf. He had his faculty of hearing, he became deaf. Or Pikech Nisbar, or he could see, he had sight, and he became blinded. Or Shafu, he was sane, but he became insane. In all those cases, the advice says it's possible. Once you don't have any of your faculty, you're missing a faculty, or you're disqualified because of your next of kin. You were disqualified. Avol. Let's say he knew some testimony about Jim. Then Jim became his son-in-law. And then his daughter died without any children. He's now his former son-in-law. He's ex-son-in-law, right? Ex-son-in-law. If there were children, then he's still connected, right? Because he's connected by the grandchildren. But if his daughter dies, no longer. So now he's not related to him anymore, right? The man had a son-in-law. The man knew some testimony about Jim. Jim became his son-in-law. He can't testify about him now. But now his wife died, or she got divorced, whatever. Not related to him anymore. So now he could testify. Or let's say a man was normal, lost his faculty of hearing, he got some infection, he couldn't hear for a while, and then he became good again. He took some antibiotics, and now he could hear again. So when he saw the event originally, he could hear. Then he became disqualified. He was sick, couldn't hear. Then he could hear again. Or the same thing. He had sight, lost it, and then regained it. Or a man was sane, the became insane, became sane again. Kosher, it's okay. Here's the rule. Zaklal. What is this teaching us? That Zaklal. Kosher osofkas. If when the event took place, he was disqualified for some reason, or he was disqualified when he's giving the testimony, then it's no good apostle. But is kosher. But if at the time of the event, when he saw the event, when he was at the event, he saw it, and when he's testifying about it, he's kosher, and it's kosher. So tiyufta, the kulu tiyufta, it's a kosher on all these rabbis here right now, because they said that no, even though you can't see, even though you can't hear, right, you could still testify about a garment or a piece of metal or a piece of karka because you know something about it. No, if you can't give testimony, you can't give testimony. So this is a kasha on all these rabbis who added on Shmuel and on Rav Sheshis and Rav Papa. It's a kasha on all of them. But the halacha will be like Rav Abba, that Rav Abba said, if your new testimony became blind, you can't give testimony anymore. Another case at the top of Amid Bey, Shalach Rav Rabbi Yosef, another case. And this is really why the Gemara is over here. This case will lead us to why all these cases are over here, as it relates to our topic. Shalach Rav Rabbi Yosef Bachama. If a man testifies about one of his children, among all of he's got a bunch of little kids, and he testified about one of them, he's believed. What kind of testimony are we talking about? We don't know yet. Because it's not believed. Okay, my comer. What are we talking about? Testify. What are you testifying about? If you testify about one of your children, that he should inherit all mine assets. I have several sons over here. Remember, we mentioned the Mishnah on Kuf Lamed that we referred to. Rabbi Yochanan broke a shita. A man could give as an inheritance. A gift you can give to whatever you want. When you're alive, you give whatever you want. You give it a second before you die. You give it to the church. I just give an example. The church say you can give it to anybody you want. Give it to the government. I'd like to make a donation to the government. Give it to whatever you want. Give it to tzedakah. Whatever you want to do, you can do when you give it. But as Yerusha, you can't. But let's say he says one of my sons should inherit me. We'll see. You can't take away the chelik b'chor, right? The chelik b'chor, if you have a b'chor, you can't take that away from him. The chelik b'chor, the extra chelik that he gets. But everything else, the chelik pashut and all the. Let's say he just had 3 sons. He had an older daughter, and then he had 3 sons. And instead of giving it, distributing among all of them equally, he said, I'm going to give it to one son. He can do that as a Yerusha. So he says, maybe that's what it means. Homer, I'll take man about Yeresh Kol Nachas, I never he's believed. Rabbi Yochanan Broka. Rabbi Yochanan Einanem, Rabbanan. We said before, it's a machlokas. Previous Mishnah was like the Rabbanan Shita. You may not do that. Rabbi Yochanan Broka says, you may do that. You may do that. You can give it to one of your sons, even as a Yerusha. Maybe that's what he means. That's what he means over here. Homer, Maskar Rabba, so say so. Why do you say he's believed or he's not believed? Just say, it's not a question of believing. Neman sounds like he's believed to testify about this son something in particular. If you're talking about that he's believed to say, I want to give one of my sons all the Yerusha, that's not a question of belief. That's a question he wants to do it. You can just say, if a person says, I want to give one of my 3 sons. I have 3 sons. No, keep it simple. Nobody's a Bechor here. He has 3 sons. Instead of dividing it equally, he says, I'd like to give it all to son number 2. He can do that. That's what you're trying to say. This son, I'm going to give one son inherit everything. So say Yirash, let him have below Yir. Should say he could do it, and that's what the first sheet is. Rav Abba says you could do it. Rabbi Yochanan says you can't do it. So say so. Don't say Ne'eman or Einanem and boy. That's what it should. It should say Yirash below Yir boy. Not Ne'eman or Einanem. Elam Rava Hachikam. This is what Rav Abba meant to say. Oh, this is the Gemara we had yesterday. If you say this one, I'm testifying, you come to town. Remember, if it's a person who, let's say that was our issue yesterday. You have a chazaka, right? A man is machzaka that number one is the bechor, and that's what people knew. And this one comes along and says, and the father comes along and says, no, number two is the bechor. What's the halacha? So there, when he asked the question, he posed the question to Shmuel, and Shmuel said, well, you make an arrangement, you make an agreement whereby each one authorizes the other one. One and two can get the share together because he doesn't know who he paskin like. So the Gemara said, if you're like the Rabbanan, say the Rabbanan. Rabbanan say no, he cannot do that. Rabbi Yehuda says he could do that. Rabbi Yehuda says Yakir that he can testament. Now, if there's Adam that this is the Bechor, again we said he can't. But if there's a Chazaka, we always assumed he's the oldest son, and now the father said no, this somebody else is the oldest son. He's believed. So that's what Rav is paskin. He's paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. That's what it means. Ella Amar Rabba Hachakamar. Amar Bechor. Man says, listen, I know you think number one is the older son because he's taller, but I'm telling you, number two is the older son. He's my Bechor. He's believed. And we'll see Rav Abba's. Remember, in all these cases except for one, we pass them like Rav Abba. So Homer Altin Ben Abanan Bechor Nevan Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yochanan Einanem like the Rabbanan. So that's the question: can a father against a chazaka? There's a presumption. Everybody knows he's lived in the neighborhood for a long time, and we always know he's the older son. All of a sudden, the father says, "No, number two is the older son." We believe the father according to Rabbi Yehuda, not according to Rabbanan. Remember, according to Rabbanan, Yaakov simply is guy shows up in town, nobody knows. Oh, these are your kids? Who's the oldest? Then he can identify him. But if it's a chazaka the other way, Rabbanan say the father cannot go against the chazaka. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says yes, and we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, meaning like Rav Abba, who paskin like Rabbi Yehuda over here. Another case, let's say a man says, even though if a man dies, his wife gets nothing. The Ksuba says, okay, she has to get alimony, meaning she has mazonos and things like that until she gets remarried. But basically, as far as Yerusha goes, she gets nothing. But let's say a man says, I like my wife to get an equal share with my sons. I'd like my wife to get a share with my sons. Now, meaning, how does that work? He's giving to her as a gift. So as a gift, he can only give her what he has right now. So Rabba says he qualifies it. He can only give what he has right now. He can't give what he's going to get later on because see, Yerusha works at the time of death, whatever he has, it's divided among the sons. If there's a Bechor, he gets a double share. If there's sons, if there's no Bechor, you give it to the sons. No sons, you give it to the daughters, etc. Right? But if you're giving something as a gift, you can only give it when he's giving it right now. So when he says it right now, even if he's on his deathbed, he says right now, whatever he has right now. But listen to this. But how does it get divided up? It gets divided among all his sons, even sons that he has later on. Let's say he's giving it to his wife an equal share, but among all his sons. He may have more sons later on. He may have less sons later on if they predecease him. So among all his sons, she's going to get an equal share, but can only give what he has right now. Assets that come in later on, you can't give her because he's giving it to her right now. Right? So so that's what he says. Yes, a man says, I'd like my wife to get a share with the children. He's giving it to her as a gift. Fine, but you have the rules of a gift. You can only give what you have right now. When we say a will works, how does a will work? Because he's effectively saying at the time that he dies, a second before he dies, whatever he has, he's giving it then. So that's how the will works. That's the tzavot. But over here, when he's just saying, I'd like my wife to get an equal share, he can give her what he has right now, but she has to divide it among all the sons at the time of the Yerusha. So it's not clear how much she's going to get. She may get more or less, depending on how many sons there were at the time that he dies. Shalchei Rav Yosef, another case. Listen to this. You have a malva and a lova. The malva says, listen, you owe me $1,000. Here's the shtar. I owe you. Malva Omer Lanafrat, you haven't been paid a nickel. You owe me the whole thing. Klum. The lova Omer Parati Machsav. Lova says I paid half. What is that called? Moda b'mixas. What's the rule of moda b'mixas? You have to swear. If I swear that I paid you the half, and I owe you, and I have to pay the other half. Okay. Then Adam come along after the fact, and they say he's paid the whole thing. Paid the whole thing. So what would you say the halach is? So it's a machlokas here. So Rav Abba said the halach is I raise a yishba v'gova machzim and chasim necharim.
he has to swear. The Lova has to swear, like he said, that he paid him half, because he says, I paid him half. He has to swear. And the Malva then could collect the other half, but not from landed property, not from Karka. Why? Avam Mishibarim low, but he can't go from Mishibarim. The Amri, what does Mishibarim mean? He can't collect from the Chasim that let's say were sold to somebody else subsequent to the loan, right? Meaning that the loan had a prior lien and now it's in the hands of other purchasers. They can claim, no, the Amri, they could say, Anan, items, we bought the property because we knew there's Adam who knew that it was all paid off. In other words, we knew there was a prior loan over here that the Lova owed $1,000. But when there was an item that it was paid off, so therefore we have the first lien. So when we bought this property from the Lova, after he borrowed the money, we knew that the loan was paid off. So you can't collect from us. So you can collect only from us from Chasam Echorim. But you can collect it even though the Lova now has Adam that is paid off. So why should he have to pay half? Because at the time that he was Moda, the Adam weren't there yet. So he was afraid. He knew what I was going to say. He was afraid. Listen to this. Rabbi Kiva says there's a famous case where a man says, Malva Lova, the Malva says, the Shtar says, that I lent you dinarim. I lent you multiple dinars, dollars, let's call it. I lent you dollars. Now, the Malva says it was $5. The Lova says it was $3. Now, the Lova could have said $2 because dollars means at least two. But since he said three, he's like Mesha Aveda. It's like we were a rule. If I find a wallet in the street and I give it back to you, say, hey, there's some money missing over here. I don't have to swear because Mesha Aveda, I didn't have to give back anything, right? I'm doing more than I had to admit. So Rabbi Kiva says over there it's Mesha Aveda. So over here also, why don't you say it's Mesha Aveda? Why do you say that he swears? Listen, he didn't have to be moted to anything. He's got witnesses over here. If he would have denied the whole thing and then the Adam said he was paid off, he wouldn't have to pay anything. He wouldn't have to make a shvua. Isn't it like a Mesha Veda? Even Rabbi Kiva says Mesha Veda over there in the case of when the document only said dollars. Hani milei have to like Adam, so Adam. Adam. If there's Adam, he says, you know what? Even over here, there's Adam. The Lova knew that there's Adam. The Lova didn't know what the Adam were going to say. The Malva said, you owe me the whole thing. The Lova doesn't know what to say. He doesn't know if the Adam are going to be on his behalf or against him. So he says, I'll bring Moda to half. He's afraid. So over here, since he's afraid, if he would have really been telling the truth and really if he would have denied the whole thing, he could have denied the whole thing, and then the Adam would have confirmed his position. But he was Moda that he owes half. When a man says, I owe you money, there's like 100 Adam. I admit that he owes them. So you can't say, well, this is the Mesha of Aveda. He didn't have to be moted to anything because he could have been afraid of the Adam. So it's not like a Mesha of Aveda. He didn't have to admit it because he didn't know what the Adam would say. Why would they lie? Okay. He didn't. It could be he forgot and he doesn't know what took place. It's an old loan. It was from years ago, and he doesn't know if he paid it or not. And he's afraid the Adam are going to say he owes the whole thing. So he said, "Okay, I admit it to half." So that it could have been that. So therefore, he has to pay half. He has to pay the other half. But you can only collect from the Chasim and Echorin because the subsequent purchasers, the subsequent lien holders can say, we thought it was paid off because of the new Adam. Let's just see that Maslu and Rav objected. He said, no, Adarabba, I feel of Shimon Elazar. Even according to Shimon Elazar, the Omer Moda makes a tainabe. In the case where the document said dollars, the Malva said 5, the Lova said 3, that's still Moda makes us. I don't mean like there's no Adam. The Messiah that are helping him, that are proving his case, that are confirming his position. He's certainly Meshav, and he shouldn't have to swear. He shouldn't have to swear. He's motive. There's Adam on my side. You know what? I know there's Adam that paid the whole thing, but I'm not really sure if they saw the whole thing. I want to be at Tzaddik, and I know I paid half, but I'm not sure about the other half. I don't want it to be on my conscience, so I admitted to paying half. So even here, he's a Meshav Veda, he shouldn't have to swear. In other words, if he's motive that he owes half, he's motive that he owes half. Why should he have to swear on the other half? He shouldn't have to swear. He's like a Meshav Veda. That's my Rav Ashi's opinion. Okay, so we have this. Rav Abba says he has to swear, and the Malva can collect half from the Chasim and Echorim. And according to Rav Ashi, he shouldn't have to swear at all. Darish Mar Zitra Mishmei Rav Shimi Barashi. He darshan like this. Like we said at the beginning, all these messages that Rav Abba sent these halachas, or Rav Yosef Barchama, all these messages that he sent halachas like them in all cases. What do you mean? To Rav Nachman, the first case that we had today, not after the two dots, not the first case from yesterday, where he said what? That can you collect from avodim, right? Remember, a man, Malva, is owed money, and the Lova dies, and the Yisomim don't have any property, but they have avodim. Can you collect from avodim like you collect from karka? So Rav Abba said yes. Rav Nachman said no, ain't going, because the Malva does not rely on that, because slaves can be here today, gone tomorrow. They could be dead. They could have run away. Whatever. They're like metaltalin in that sense, and you can't collect from there. So that was what Rav Nachman said. So what are you going to say over here? He said the Allah is like Rav Abba even in this case. Only Rav Nachman. What Rav Nachman? Rav Nachman, like Rashi says, like Rav Nachman Dinam. We always hold like Rav Nachman when it comes to halachas in Dinam. In other words, not in, let's say, crime cases, but in Dinam we have pasuk Rav Nachman, and he says you can't collect. You may not collect from the avodim. Amalei Engel Maslin Allah. Taka, when Marzutra said Mishmeid Rav Shimon Allah is like all these cases like Rav Abba, and you said, but in this case Rav Nachman, we pass like Rav Nachman like Rav Abba. No, I learned that Rav Abba said like Rav Nachman. I learned Engovin. In other words, we started at the two dots today by saying Shachar Rav Yosef Bachama Halacha Govin Navadim. He says no. My gear says that Rav Abba said Ein Govin Navadim. V'chein Omar Rav Nachman, and so did Rav Nachman say. So here, and according to this, the halacha is like Rav Abba in all the cases, even in that case, because it's not that he disagrees with Nachman; he agrees with Nachman. Okay, so wait a minute. So now, according to this, the Rashbam, the last on Rashbam on yesterday's episode, Rav Abba. Yeah, even in this case, we pass like Rav Abba because Rav Abba said like Rav Nachman, not like the first gears that we have here that he disagreed with Nachman. He agreed with Rav Nachman. You cannot collect from Rav Abba. So if that's the case, what's Marzutra teaching me? Rav Marzutra said in the name of Rav Shemash, Allah is like Rav Abba in all these cases. What do you mean like it? He's running unopposed. All these halachas, there's nobody argues with him. He says all the cases, nobody arguing. What do you come? Ila pukim Rava. If you're including from Rava, remember Rava who said Rav Abba said you can testify about a first cousin once removed. Rav Abba said you can even testify about a great uncle. Okay. It's not necessary. Rav Abba Mosif, he's just adding on. It doesn't mean that Rav Abba is disagreeing. There was a case there with a first cousin once removed, like the case we had at Rumi's son's wedding, and there was a question whether the question came up about a first cousin once removed. So Rav Abba said, first cousin once removed, you could testify about that. Comes along to Rav Abba says, not only that, you could also testify a great uncle. It doesn't mean Rav Abba disagrees with that. He's simply adding on. So that's not like halachas like him and excluding from Rava. Idamar bar Ravashi. If you were about Ravashi, who said you could even testify about a grandfather, that clearly Gemara said already the last lechos Kamar bar Ravashi. Lechos not like him at all. You already said that. Ila pukim l'shmuel Rav Shesher Rav Baba. Maybe he's coming to exclude from Shmuel and Rav Shesher Rav Baba, who said that a blind or deaf or insane person can, let's say at least a blind person can testify about a piece of karka or a cloak or a garment or a piece of metal. They can estimate the boundaries or the weight or whatever the measurements. We already asked Kasha, and then we brought a Mishnah from Seder and said that if you're not sane at the time of the event, if you're not sane with all your faculties, sight and hearing at the time of the event as well as the time of the testimony, you cannot testify. Ela pukim Rav Yochanan. From Rav Yochanan. Back to our case from yesterday, that the case of can a father pronounce son number 2 as the Bechor when it's assumed that that number 1 is the Bechor. There's a chazaka that number 1 is the Bechor. The father says that number 2 is the Bechor. So what do we say over here? Rav Abba said yes, he can do that because he goes like Rabbi Yochanan Broka, not like Rabbi Yochanan, but like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabban. Rabbi Yehuda said that a father could testify Yakir. He could testify even against the chazaka that number 2 is the Bechor, not number 1. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan said no, the halacha is like the Rabbanan. He may not. Rabbi Yochanan, he's not believed to say that. So that's what he means. The halacha is like Rav Abba, excluding from Rabbi Yochanan. The halacha is like Rav Abba, and not like Rabbi Yochanan, who says that the father cannot identify number 2 as the Bechor. If it's assumed that number 1 is the Bechor, we have such a chazaka, the father cannot go against that. That's the Rabbanan Shita, and that's Rabbi Yochanan got like the Rabbanan. Whereas Rav Abba went like Rabbi Yehuda that we paskin like. And what else? Umi askafted Ravashi, the last case we had over here. Ravashi said no, even according to Shimon Elazar, who says that in the case of where it just said dollars and the Malva said it's $5 and the Loba said it's $3, that's still motive mixas. That's where there's no Edom. The Messiah lays, there's no Edom. So therefore, then in a case like that, maybe there he's considered motive itself. He's my measure of Aveda. He could have, he knows there's witnesses who say that he paid the whole thing. So when he comes along to say, I admit that I owe half, he's simply returning a lost item. He didn't have to be motive to that at all. So in that case like that, and that was Rav Ashi's kasha. Maybe this is a case of Mesha Aveda, but Rav Abba's opinion was no, it's not a case of Mesha Aveda, because it could be he was afraid of the Adam, and that's why he was motive, and therefore it's motive mixus. So when we say here the halacha is like Rav Abba in all these cases that we delineated, where it's like him in what sense? Who are we excluding? We're excluding Rabbi Yochanan, who said that a father cannot identify son number 2 as the Bechor if it's assumed that number 1 is the Bechor. We're excluding from his halach that we discount Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. And this last kasha, Rav Ashi, who says that he's a Mesha Aveda. No, he's not a Mesha Aveda. He's a Moda Mixus, and therefore he has to pay the other, half. He's moted that he owes half, and not only does he have to pay it, but he has to swear on the first half that that's paid off. That's the issue over here. The Mesha Aveda is returning the money. Anyway, he's returning the money. He admits that he owes the money. Nobody disagrees with that he owes the money. The issue is, does he have to make a shvua on the half that he claims has been paid? All right, tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh. We'll start tomorrow from these 2 dots at 5 lines down on Kuf Kuf Testament.
It's good. Beautiful.
Have a good day. Remember the wedding, right, Rami?
Yes.